All right, all right, all right. Let's go, let's go, let's go. Welcome back. Hope you guys had a good weekend. Hope you had a good day so far. Do me a favor before we get started, just to make sure it's to a sound check. If you can hear me, drop a one in the chat. That way, I just know that we're good to go, and I don't have to fix anything that's going to be an issue. So if you can hear me talking, just drop a one in the chat. I'd appreciate it. So today we're going to be talking about some business stuff, some general business things. I want to talk to you about a little bit about the podcast that dropped today on not being a task rabbit, assigning and responsibilities. I want to touch on that a little bit. I also want to talk to you about a little bit of some real math with some real business, using some real business numbers to see where this could actually where you can be in business based on where you're currently at. So if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, do me a favor, drop a one in the chat just so I know you can hear me okay. I know TikTok we're good. I just like to check all the channels and make sure that we are good to go. So let me know if you guys can hear me on that, okay or not. So let's um let's get to it. So I talked about it in my podcast that dropped this morning. And by the way, guys, if you don't listen to my podcast, it's every Monday morning. It drops. We're on episode. I think we're on episode 138. Drops this morning. So we are a little over 2 years into this. So I want to keep providing more value for you guys. So if you have any idea, if you guys ever have any ideas for a podcast episode and you want me to talk more about that, just shoot me a message. Let me know. Comment, smoke screen, I don't care, air writing, whatever. Just get the message to me, and I'd be more than happy to talk about that specific topic for you in the podcast. Now, real quick, I want to throw this question out, and you guys can give me real feedback. I'm considering starting another podcast. Not getting rid of the Hammer and Grind podcast, but I'm considering starting another podcast that's going to be more of a chat with other contractors. So it's not going to be so much like educating like I do in the Hammer and Grind podcast, where I either talk about a topic or I interview an expert in a specific field. This would be more about just conversational chats, a little more fireside chat isk, where it's just two guys or potentially three guys having a conversation around business in general, construction, and really more of a show than a podcast. What's your guys' thoughts on that? Is that something that you would be interested in listening to or watching, or is that just going to add more noise to your already busy schedule? Um, I get approached a lot by people that are like, "Hey, I'd love to be on your podcast. I've been in construction for 10 years. I own a business, blah blah blah." And it's really just about, for lack of better term, shooting the shit on the show, right? Just talking about business stuff. And I like doing that, but that's not the same as like approaching a topic from the standpoint of actually giving real, actionable steps and information about that. So I don't want to introduce that into the Hammer and Grind podcast. I want to keep that the way it is, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts on whether or not an additional show, and this would be probably a little bit less, it'd definitely be less formal and, less strategic. So in other words, it wouldn't be like I would release one every week type thing. It would just be whenever. I mean, I might release two in 1 week, or I might not release any for a month. So let me know your thoughts on that. I see three of you on Facebook or YouTube. I lost everyone on TikTok. Short attention spans. So, anyways, I'm just curious to get some feedback on that. So, with the podcast I talked about that dropped today, I was talking about, you know, Profit Club members only. I'm not. No, I mean it wouldn't. I mean I would probably approach Profit Club members first. However, I'm not. I'm not. It's not. I don't have to be mutually exclusive to that idea. In other words, that could be a potential. That could be a potential. But I'm also not. I don't want to exclude other people that would be able to have that conversation as well. So, anyways, that's a good question. Back to the podcast that dropped today. I want to talk about with the assign responsibilities. Don't be a tasker, right? So in that episode, I talked about most of us are taskmasters and we have task rabbits. That's where a lot of us are in business, where we, whether we're on the out in the field or not, like working on the tools, or maybe we have a foreman and we're in the office, whatever. Most of us are taskmasters and we want to hire people that can be really good task rabbits. So it's like, hey, I tell Johnny, I'm like, Johnny, I need you to go and install all the trim in that house, whatever. I'm just making stuff up. And Johnny's like, okay, boss. And he goes and installs all the trim. He gets done. He's like, okay, now what? What do you want me to do now? Right. Well, now I need you to go and whatever, take the trash out, get all the trash picked up, throw it in the dumpster, blah 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 blah. Like you're just tasking people with things to do on on different things. Yeah, Raphael, I've been back. I think I missed one week a couple weeks ago. But yeah, I'm back. Even with the flickering camera that's going on. So back to what I was saying. So most of us are taskmasters. We just task, and then we want to hire someone. We want to hire a lead guy. We want to hire a carpenter. We want to hire these people that we believe, like intuitively in their brain, know how to do the task that we are tasking them to do. But we have no system, we have no formal training, we have no checklist, we have no SOP, we have nothing that actually helps them to understand what we do. And then we get frustrated whenever they don't do it, right? Or we have people that are sticking around, that are just standing around. They go do a task, they just stand around and they're waiting for 15 minutes. They're outside. Like you tell them, go take all the trash outside and put it in the trailer. And they're like, cool. And then they're gone for like 45 minutes. And you're like, man, that was only like a 20-minute task. Like, where are they at? And then you eventually walk outside and they're just standing out there on their phone, or, joking around with somebody else or whatever. You're like, what are you doing? You're like, well, you told me to clean the trash out, and I figured you were going to come out here and tell me what to do next. Right. And then we get all frustrated. It's like, man, you can't find good help these days, and nobody listens, and nobody can read my mind and know what the next step is. And, when I'm doing this task, they should know I need this tool next, blah, 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 blah. You guys probably sounds familiar. That's, that is insanity in your own brain to think that people are going to operate like that. You have to teach them on what to do and what their roles and responsibilities are, whether that's through a work order, a piece of paper that says, hey, this is your task, or whatever it is. Like, that has to be laid out. And then on top of that, you need to assign responsibilities, because responsibilities, in other words, they take ownership in that task or what they're doing, and now that is their task every time you do that job. So if you are doing let's say you're a landscaper, you're doing a landscaping project. Let's say you're installing pavers, right? You're doing a paver project in the backyard. Well, what are things that have to be done on every job? Well, you got to excavate where the path's going, or where the pavers are going. That's got to be excavated, right? Well, what are some things that are involved with that? You got to have equipment, right? Or you got to have, whether it's mechanical or manual, you got to have some type of equipment to excavate all the dirt and all that, whatever it is. And then you have to put down some kind of base, whether you do sand or, crushed stone or whatever. You got to put down some kind of base, right? And then you lay the pavers and all these steps that you may have. Like the steps are the same, every time you do that type of project. So like every time you do a paver project, the steps should be the same. Now you may have, you may add a couple extra steps depending on if it's natural stone versus a man-made stone or whatever. Like you may have extra steps in there based on the complexities of a job, but you still have a series of basic steps that have to be done, right? And so you can assign, let's say, excavating. Maybe you have a skid steer or a mini excavator or a dingo or some kind of a piece of equipment, and you always do this certain thing. Well, you're going to have one operator whose responsibility is to operate that equipment, and you're going to have another person who may be a laborer, and his responsibility is to crumb out all of the stuff or whatever it may be. I'm trying to keep this generic so it's easily understandable, but you're not saying, hey Timmy, whenever I excavate this out, take your shovel and crumb out all, get all the little pieces out too, right? That's me assigning him a task versus a responsibility. It's like, Timmy, anytime that we're ever doing excavation, your responsibility is to make sure that everything is crumbed out, like from start to finish every time. That is your responsibility. So when we pull up to a job on day one and we start doing excavation, you already know that that's your job. That's your responsibility to make sure it's crumbed out, right? That's a responsibility versus a task. So if I assign him that responsibility, now the next time we do it, I shouldn't have to tell Tim, hey, go get the shovel and start crumbing it out, right? Like I shouldn't have to do that because now he owns that responsibility. And if let's say you're the one that's out in the field and you're running the excavator, you also have to give them opportunities to fail and then learn from that opportunity, learn from that lesson, right? So let's say then you assign that responsibility to Tim to do all the crumbing. Of course, you're going to teach him the proper ways to do that. And then the next job you go and after you've assigned a responsibility, you show up, you start excavating. You don't say anything to Tim. You don't tell him to get the shovel. You don't even, if he's standing there watching, you don't say anything to him. You just do what you normally do. And then when it's time for the next step, right? If there's things that he hasn't done, you're going to be like, hey, Tim, we can't go to the next step. He'd be like, why? Because you didn't do your job. So now we're going to stand around here and wait for you to do your job. Right? Like that's an opportunity. It's a failure opportunity with the opportunity to learn. Now, obviously, I'm not going to let my guys fail on something that's going to cost, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, whether it's through time or breaking things or whatever. But you still have to be able to allow your guys to make mistakes, and you have to have a culture where it's okay to make mistakes. And if they do, they learn from it. They don't get their butt chewed out, and they're so scared to death to make mistakes. Because when you go to the other side of the spectrum where you chew their butt out every time they make a mistakes, and it's like a high, it's this high stressful, high stakes thing where you make one mistake and then the business is going to fail because there's no profit margins. Like when you create that kind of culture, then you will absolutely create task rabbits because nobody's going to want to make any decisions without getting the boss's approval first because it's too high of a stake, right? It affects too much. You can't do that. You have to give them the autonomy to make their own decisions and fail and then learn from that. And if they're, obviously you would want to help. I don't want to say obviously. When you're hiring people, and I get that sometimes that can be difficult, but when you're hiring people, you don't want to hire people that are just like, for lack of better term, complete idiots, right? I mean, they have to be able to like, 2 + 2 is 4. And if I stick a shovel in the ground, I'm supposed to lift dirt. Like they can't be just absolutely stupid. They have to have an inherent ability to understand direction. Okay. So, assuming that you are not hiring absolute morons, which you shouldn't be, then you can assign people the responsibility and they should be able to have the autonomy to make a decision and fail and learn from that. Right. And then you go over it. The other part of the equation that some of you guys don't do is you give them the autonomy to make mistakes, but you don't have a teaching moment on the back end. You just have a butt chewing moment, right? They make a mistake, they don't do their job, and you go, Tim, what are you doing, man? I told you this is your job, this is your responsibility. You have to get out here and do this. Otherwise, what's the point of having you on staff? Like, if you're not going to do that and I got to do it, I might as well just get rid of you and do it myself. Right? If that's your response, that's not going to help at all. Versus if you go and you know that he didn't crumb out the stuff, and the next step you go to put in sand or sub base or whatever you're doing, compact or whatever. Like, I would even start doing that to where it gets to a point to where it's like it's not going to work. Like, it's obvious that's not going to work, and it's like, hey, we can't put the sub base in yet. Why not? Well, there's crumbs everywhere. Oh, well, whose responsibility is that? And everybody looks at Tim, right? And everybody's looking at Tim that he didn't do his job. Now you have accountability with responsibility. Tim, what's up? Like, I thought I told you this was your responsibility. Yeah, you did. You did, boss. I just I kind of forgot. Okay. So whenever I asked you to repeat back what your responsibility was, and you told me word for word what it was, like, I don't understand. Like, how did you forget? Oh, I don't know. I was thinking about something else and I just forgot. Okay, so can you see now what's happening? Like, now we're gonna have to go back and fix this, and it's gonna set us back an hour because this should have been done while we were doing the excavation. Yeah, I'm so sorry, boss. Like, it won't ever happen again. I'm sorry, blah blah blah. Like, now you've created a teachable moment for them, and I can almost guarantee you that Tim will never make that mistake again, or at least very, very infrequently will he make that mistake. And if he does, there's probably some other circumstance going on. I know it's a very rudimentary example of like assigning responsibility, but this is what needs to happen with your teams out in the field, or even like office managers or salesmen or marketing people, whatever. Like, you need to assign the outcome, tell them what the outcome is, and then give them responsibility of that outcome. So in this case, Tim's outcome, acceptable level of outcome, is that all the path is crumbed out. Everything's cut clean. There's no lumps of dirt or grass anywhere in there, and it's ready for sub base next, or compaction, or whatever you're doing. Like, that is his responsibility on every job going forward. It's not, okay, Tim, today you're gonna crumb out the stuff, and then tomorrow, Tim, you're gonna get the sub base ready, and then the next job you're gonna do this. Like, you don't change responsibilities on every single job. And then if someone's absent, if someone is sick or out, you can have secondary jobs. Like, people can also be trained in other jobs as a secondary so that you can cover whenever that stuff happens. Or maybe you have to split up your crew for whatever reason. Like, they have a main set of responsibilities that they're responsible for, and then there could be a subset of skills that they're not really responsible for, but they know how to do, so that in the absence of someone else, they can fill in. Right? Cross job training is what that is. So comment came in and says, I'm guilty for that. Glad I'm taking the steps to correct that terrible way of operating. I don't know who you are on Facebook. I can't see your name, unfortunately. So I don't know who commented that. So does that make sense? Guys, does that make sense? Like, assigning responsibilities versus being a taskmaster? Go to the comments and let me know. Like, if you do that. If you're a taskmaster, if you're just assigning task every single day to people, and they don't just know that when they get there and they have to do that job automatically, throw a 2 in the chat. Yeah, Stormore, it's kind of like dedicated tooling for employees. Yeah, I mean, that's an example of that. But I don't want to make it sound so granular, like every single person has to have 15 different tasks that they're responsible for, or different things, but you can assign responsibilities on specific things. So for example, one of the responsibilities that I assigned to the helpers or apprentice, whatever you want to call them, the lowest guy on the totem pole, they were actually responsible for keeping the vehicles clean, organized, and stocked. That was their task. That's an important task, but it's an easy one to do. I'm not asking them to know how to remodel a bathroom from start to finish. All I'm asking them to do from a responsibility standpoint is make sure the vehicle stays stocked, that it's cleaned out every week, and that all the tools get put back where they go every week so that we know where stuff goes. Uh, okay, you said 75% of the time. You're tasking stuff out. So what can you do? I can't see your name. I don't know who I'm talking to, unfortunately, on Facebook. But what type of work do you do? And it may be even somebody I know. I just can't see your name. By the way, on Facebook, if you just go to the post right above here, there should be a link. You just click on that link, and it allows me to see your name. So, so anybody else, like, are you a taskmaster? Are you guilty of being a taskmaster? Put a 2 in the chat, and then tell me what kind of work you do, and I can maybe give you some examples of like how to correct that to stop being a taskmaster. And this isn't an overnight thing, guys. Just so you know, like, this isn't an overnight. You're just going to go in tomorrow and just start, you're responsible for this. You're responsible for that. You're responsible for this. Like, it doesn't really happen like that. But the first thing is understanding the difference between assigning responsibility versus being a task rabbit. And then we go into laying out all the different responsibilities and then laying out who's going to take those responsibilities. And that may include, or that may require you having a conversation with, if you do have a foreman or a project manager or whatever, it may require you having a conversation with them to say, okay, who's going to be best suited to do this task? Okay, John, I see you. Right? Who's best suited to do this task? Right? And he may say, well, Steve's really good at running the equipment. So I really like to have him be on the excavator whenever we're doing jobs. All right, cool. He is going to be the equipment operator. Does that require additional training? Maybe, maybe not. Do we need to send Steve to some kind of equipment operation school or whatever? Do we need to give him additional training on the side? Like, part of that is figuring out who's going to fit the roles the best, the roles and responsibilities the best. So, and also there's the whole other element to this is that you don't want your lead guys, your key employees, doing the most menial task, right? You want them doing the more complicated task if that requires someone to do that. I can tell you right now what most of you do. If you're a single owner operator, if you're out in the field, I can tell you one task that you're doing right now that you absolutely should not be doing. If you're on the tools, if you're the owner and you're on the tools, there's one task that I can almost guarantee if I bet 9 out of 10 times I would be correct, I can guarantee you that you're doing this task and you absolutely shouldn't be. Does anyone want to guess what that is? It happens on every single job. And it's probably your favorite thing to do. It's the easiest and favorite thing to do. Who wants to take a guess at what that is? Let's get some feedback going on here. I'll tell you here in a second. While I take a drink, tell me what you think that is, what that task is. Almost everybody who does, if you're stuck on the tools, I guarantee you, almost every one of you do this. I'll wait a couple seconds. Anybody? Nobody has a guess? It's going and getting materials from the store. There's no reason for you to be doing that whatsoever. If you're on the tools and you're working out on the job site and you come to a point where it's like, oh man, we ran out of 2x4s or whatever, we got to go get 10 more 2x4s, or we got to go get some OSB or whatever it is you're doing, you should not be the one going and doing that. You should have the least expensive person, the least trained person going and doing that task. And then some of you may say, well, I've done that before, and they end up buying the wrong stuff. They end up doing the wrong thing. And I say, you know what? I've been there. I've done that. I've even given my guy a list of everything. And one of the times I said we needed 3 2x10 by whatever, 10 footers. I need you to go get 3 2x10 by 10 footers. And there was a bunch of other things on that list, like 6 things. It wasn't a lot, but it was like 6 different line items of things that we needed with quantities next to them. So there was no question about how many of each. And he gets back and he only had like one or two. I don't remember if it was one or two, but he didn't have enough joist. And that was like the one thing that we needed the most. The other things were just kind of extra things. I needed 3 joists, and he got like one or two. I don't remember. And I'm like, dude, what happened here? Like what? He's like, oh, you know what I did? I looked at the list and I saw the one below it. You had one marked for like, one whatever piece of drywall. And I just happened to look at it and I thought it was one. And you may think, how in the hell can you get that wrong when I give you an actual list of everything? Right? Some of you may say that. Well, what could you do better to make sure that doesn't happen? There's lots of things you can do better, right? On this list that was written out, they were real tight and scrunched in there. What if I spread them out? What if I had a half an inch between each item? Would that help someone who maybe has ADD or doesn't, has dyslexic or whatever? Would that help them to see that easier? Probably. What if I put a line underneath between each one to like separate that visually with a line? That would probably help too, right? So, like, I'm not saying it's a perfect scenario solution that's always going to 100% fix everything across the board. But in that instance of me assigning him this responsibility of getting the materials and him not getting the right amount of floor joist, that was a learning lesson for me to make sure that next time we do that, the information is clear. And I even asked them to recite that back. Can you see that? Yes. How many of each? 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. But a lot of us, we just get pissed off and frustrated, like, oh man, we need another joist, and we never use that as a learning or teaching moment. Every mistake that is made in our business is a teaching moment. Every single mistake. The problem is most of you think you don't have time to use that as a teaching moment. And that's because you don't have time, because you're not charging enough, because you're not figuring enough time into your estimates. Whether you're not, whether it should take 100 man hours and you're only estimating 80, or you got the correct amount of hours, but you're, or days or whatever, but you're not actually charging enough. Because I guarantee you, when you start charging enough and you're making really good profits, whenever your guy goes to the store and comes back short one joist, you're not as pissed off as you were when every second counted, when you were already one day over schedule. And now every hour that you work is costing you money, costing you profit. When you're a day behind and it's costing you profit and the guy comes back from the store and he doesn't bring the right amount, that's very stressful, right? But when you have plenty of profit in your business, on your jobs, and the guy comes back, it's like, hey, Tim, I get it. You made a mistake. What could we have done better? What could I have done different to make sure we didn't make this mistake? How could I have presented this information to you to make sure that this doesn't happen again? Right? Get that feedback and have that teaching moment. But that all comes back to making sure you're charging enough. So I want to do something a little bit different for the last 15 minutes. I want to look at some real world examples of like how pricing correctly can literally change everything in your business. So if I have any guinea pigs, I mean volunteers who's willing to share, I need 2 numbers from you. I need to know what your revenue is for like either last year or the last 12 months or whatever, or even this year to date, what your total revenue is, and then also what your average gross profit or what your gross profit percentage on that revenue is, because I want to run some numbers in real time and really like help you through this so you can understand how much money you're losing. So any guinea pigs willing to share their revenue and their gross profit percentage? And if you're a Profit Club member, you can't do this because you already have the results. So let me know if nobody does it. I'll just make up some numbers here to give you an example, but I'd like to use a real life example if possible. Yeah, Raphael says I agree with you. It all comes down to bad training. We're all running for that money. Nobody's willing to share the numbers. All right, I'll put some numbers here. Let's say last year you did $250,000 in revenue. We'll just use this. I know some of you may be doing millions, some of you may be doing less. It doesn't matter. We're just using this as an example. So you do 250. And by the way, can you guys read that? Is that actually, is that backwards or is that actually correct? Let me know if you can read that. Correct. Okay, cool. All right, it's good. So if you had a $250,000 a year revenue, and revenue is total amount, materials, everything, just total sales, right? It's not income, like how much profit. It's just you sold total everything, $250,000 revenue. If you on average got a 30% gross profit on your jobs, that means on $250,000 you are making 75,000. You're making 75,000 in gross profit. Now that's before overhead, that's before payments, anything, right? 75,000. Already we're not making enough money. I can just tell you right now, we're not making enough money. Maybe this is a small company. Maybe it's the first year in business. Maybe you've been a couple years and you're struggling. Maybe you have low material. It's like mostly labor. But let's just say you have a $250,000 revenue business at 30% gross profit. Is gonna net you or gross you $75,000 gross profit, right? So that means if that's the case, that our COGS, our cost of doing business, is what? You guys know? We just subtract 75 from 250, it's 175. Right? 175,000. That's how much our COGS are. That means that we're spending 175,000 on COGS. I hope this is right because I'll just tell you right now, guys, I'm terrible at math. That's why I got into construction to begin with. I'm just checking my numbers here, and if anything's wrong, let me know. By the way, okay, I think we're good so far. So if we did $250,000 in revenue, 30% gross profit means that we made $75,000 gross profit, and that leaves $175,000 of COGS. That's what our cost of goods, meaning subcontractors, materials, labor, anything that it costs to produce that job, is $175,000. Now, if we did $175,000 using that COGS at a 50% gross profit, okay, 50% gross profit, then what is that? You guys know what that is? I know what it is, but do you guys know what it is? Difference? Anybody? If you have $175,000 gross profit, I keep saying the wrong terms. COGS, 125. No, if you had 175,000 in COGS at a 50% gross profit, that means your total revenue is $350,000 a year. That makes sense. You put store more, you might have meant 175, or maybe you thought that was 125. If you're getting a 50% profit, gross profit on 175 COGS, it's the same because you're taking 175 times 2. So it's 175 times 2 is $350,000. So what I'm trying to point out here is that you have 175,000. The COGS didn't change. Your cost didn't change. Okay, your cost didn't change at all. To produce the work. But if we simply charged more, at least a 50% gross profit, we're going to make $100,000 more. And where does that extra $100,000 go? Does anybody know? Does anybody know where the extra $100,000 go? It goes into your gross profit. 175,000 GP. Now, if you're running your business currently at this rate up here at 30% gross profit and you're only making $75,000, chances are all of your overhead is covered except for your pay, owner's pay, right? Because that's the last thing you're doing is paying yourself. So you're only making 75,000 gross profit. Most of that's going to go to your insurance and your truck payments and tools and all the other stuff that you're doing, your website and marketing and blah 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 blah. Like you're spending, you might be spending $60,000 a year, which only leaves you with like 15. Or maybe you have a super conservative overhead. You only got $30,000 overhead, so you're only making 45,000 a year, right? My point is that your overhead is already covered, so you don't have more overhead. What happens to your business when the overhead doesn't change, but you add an extra $100,000 to your revenue, to your gross profit? Not revenue. What is revenue? But to your gross profit. What happens to the extra $100,000 if your overhead is already covered? Somebody in the comments, tell me. Let's say your overhead is conservative 30,000 a year. So you're paying yourself probably can't see it right here. Your overhead's 30,000. So what's left of 75 minus 30 is 45,000. So you're paying yourself $45,000, right? And then you infuse an extra $100,000 into your business. Where does that money go? Some of you got it. John says vacation time. Yeah, that definitely can be one of them. Let me erase this and set it back up. Make it easier. Rubio says to the business to grow. It could be in the company. Pure pay dirt. Gas station drugs. I love that name, Raphael. You make more money in your pocket. Yeah. So if your overhead, and again, everybody's is different, but let's just say in this scenario, if you're small, only doing 250, your overhead is 30K, and then your pay, because it's just whatever's left over, is 45. How much for net? How much for net profit? If you're only making 75,000 and you have 30,000 in overhead, and you take out 45, how much does the company have in net profit in this scenario? Right? You had 75 to start with. I should have done this different. I'm not good at doing this on the fly. You had 75 to start with. Your overhead's 30. You're paying yourself 45,000. How much net profit do you have left over? The answer is 0. No, you have 0 left over because you're taking all the money out of your business. You had 75 to start. Your overhead's 30. You're paying yourself the additional 45, that's 75,000, right? You have zero net profit, meaning your business made $0 that year. And some of you like think that whatever you pay yourself is your business. It's not. Your business needs to be treated as its own entity. Your business needs to be like an additional employee. It needs to make money. That's how you finance additional vehicles. That's how you finance marketing. That's how you finance growth in your business. That's how you keep the bad guy away. When you have $0, if this is your life right now, okay? Can you guys see that? Let me get over here where you can see it. Let me do it this way. Can you guys see that? If you have $0 extra, and then January the 5th, okay, this is the end of the year. You made 45, the company paid all its bills. You got $0 in the bank account because you zeroed it out. And then on January 5th, your truck engine blows up and you need $7,500 for a new engine. Where does that leave you? Where does that leave you at? It leaves you at a negative $7,500 because you have $0 in the bank. Your business had made nothing. You guys understanding this? So this is where if you add an extra $100,000 to your business, right? Instead of it being 75,000, we're doing 175, right? Because we added an extra $100,000 by charging correctly. Now we have an extra $100,000. Our overhead didn't change. It shouldn't change. So that stays the same. Now we can, let's just say we don't even pay ourselves more, although you should, but let's say we don't. Now what happens whenever your engine blows up at $7,500 and you have an extra $100,000 in your account? What happens next? You write a check. That's it. You literally just write a check and you go about your day. Right? And maybe you do add more money to your, what you're paying yourself, because you should be paying yourself like at least $100,000 a year. But when you have an extra $100,000, and this is just a basic example, a very doable example, by the way. But when you have an extra $100,000, guess what? These $7,500 new engines doesn't affect you one bit. I mean, it doesn't mean that you like it or enjoy it, but it doesn't affect you. It doesn't affect you at all because you have money in the bank, right? This is just one example. This is a $250,000 business doing 30% margins. 30% is the average. That's the average margins that most of you guys, and that's gross profit. And that's assuming that you have an efficient business, meaning you're not losing money. Most of you are actually losing money. You think you're getting a 30% gross profit. In reality, you're not. You're probably getting closer to a 20% gross profit on jobs. And if that's the case, and you think you're doing 30, meaning you're underbidding jobs on production, like you're just purely underbidding jobs, now you're losing money. And that's how you end up at the end of the year in a negative balance, not even a zeroed out balance. That's how you end up at the end of the year. Instead of paying yourself 45,000, you're paying yourself 20,000, because that extra 20,000 or 25,000 you had to spend to make up for the inefficiencies of your estimating or your incorrect or underbidding, the production side of it. That's a whole nother situation that we go into, right? So does that make sense? Drop a 3 in the comments if that makes sense. If you saw me from start to finish, if that's making sense, drop a 3 in the comments. I want to make sure that we understand how the math got there. If it doesn't make sense, let me know, and I can go back over it. Let me know. Let's do another number. Somebody said, somebody threw in there, they said last year for the first year in business was 37,265 and a gross margin of 86. So if you got a gross margin of 86%, you just need more work. Fox Improvements. Like if you're truly getting 80% gross margin on your jobs, you just need a lot more leads. You have a lead problem or a sales problem. Maybe you're getting a bunch of leads, but you're not able to sell them. That's a lead and sales problem. Because 86.5% gross profit is pretty good. That's pretty phenomenal. So let's use another example real quick. Let's say you have a $500,000 a year business. That's revenue. Okay, $500,000 a year revenue, and you're still getting a 30% gross. Again, that's the average. That ends up being $150,000. So you're okay, yeah, Fox. So you are you're getting 150,000 gross profit on 500,000. The higher the number, the higher the revenue number goes, the worse it gets as far as your profit on your percentages. So now you're at a 50%. I'm sorry, 30%. So if we subtract 500 from 150 from 500, what's that get us? Anybody know? By quick maths, 350, right? That's our COGS. That means on a $500,000 a year revenue business, Carrot loves tomatoes. This is besides the point of gross profit. What about getting consistent invoices done for customers? I don't know. I don't understand the question. What do you mean, like getting consistent invoices done? Can you elaborate on that? I'll come back to it. So if you have a $500,000 a year revenue business, you're getting a 30% gross profit. That's 150%, or I'm sorry, $150,000 gross profit, which means your COGS comes out to $350,000, right? So now that means if we had a $350,000 COGS times 50%, does anybody know what that is? Should be pretty easy. It's the same number because you take it times 2. It's 350,000. It's 350,000. The gross profit, Stormore. I'm talking about gross profit. So if your COGS are 350,000 and you get a 50% on that, that means your gross profit's going to be $350,000, which means that your revenue is actually 700,000, which is what you put. Do you might know the difference between 350 and 150 gross profit? Do you might know what the difference of that is? $350 minus 150. That's a $200,000 a year difference in profit. $200,000 a year, and that's 2 trucks, Stormore. If you're doing $500,000 a year revenue right now at a 30% gross profit, you're only collecting $150,000 gross profit. If you make that a 50% gross profit, you're going to add an extra $200,000 a year in profit. Because again, we're assuming that our overhead is already covered with the lower number, with the 30% gross, our overhead's covered. So we're not adding overhead, we're adding pure profit. Who on here would not want an extra $200,000 a year in profit without doing a single extra job? So whatever your workload is now, whether it's 10 jobs a year, 50 jobs a year, or 500 jobs a year, you're not adding an extra job. In other words, you're not doing more work. You're not working more hours or doing more jobs, but you're going to add $200,000 in profit, which is going to end up being essentially net profit or money that goes in your pocket because you've already covered your overhead expenses, right? Everyone on here should be saying me. I would take an extra $200,000 without doing anything different. That's literally all you have to do in your business to have this kind of money is change the markup of what you do on your business, change your gross profit or change your markup percentage. So this is why you need to make sure you're charging appropriately. Now, what happens when you do that? What happens when you raise your prices? Put in the comments what happens when you raise the prices. I mean, it should be the number one response. What happens when you raise your prices? Anybody? Raphael, yeah. The customer doesn't want to pay, right? Yeah, John, you're right. You're able to do more. But what happens when you raise your prices? What do the customers usually say? They tell you they have to think about it. In other words, they balk. Your customers say, "Oh, that's way more than what we want to pay," right? Or you have a justification for price, or they have to think about it. So in other words, if you raise your prices, you're going to have more pushback on your price. Makes sense, right? Why would anyone pay $30,000 for a project that you used to do for 20,000, right? So the what I do for contractors is teach them how to sell these jobs at a 50% gross profit. That's the hard part in it, right? It's the actual selling part. It's the communication part. It's the how to communicate value through the whole experience. So what we do in the Profit Club is take you through the entire customer journey. From that includes everything from having a good website, good branding, good website or wraps, all that stuff. A lot of guys in the Profit Club are posting in there, "Hey, I'm getting new wraps. What do you think?" We give feedback, tell them how to make it look better, all the way through the sales process of how to actually sell jobs, how to quit doing free estimates ever again, right? How to get paid to go out and do consultations. So not only are you going to make an extra $100,000-$200,000 a year in gross profit, but you're also going to save time by not doing free estimates anymore. The average contractor in the Profit Club saves 10 hours a week, literally 10 hours a week by not doing free estimates. That's the average. That means some save as much as 20 hours a week and some as little as, a few hours a week, depending on what they do. Like that's all part of it. That's what we do. So if you guys are wanting to learn how to add an extra, $50,000, $100,000, $200,000 a year to your bottom line without doing any more work, as a matter of fact, you can do less work because in this scenario, if you make an extra $200,000 in gross, you could actually do 3, 4, 5 less jobs a year, and maybe you only make 120,000 extra. But guess what? That goes all in your pocket. So you instantly go from making 45,000 a year, or maybe you're making 65,000 a year, to making 120,000 a year or 150,000 a year, and you're doing 4 or 5 less jobs a year. It's a hell of a lot better business. It's easier to manage because you're not doing as much work. Everything slows down. You're able to take a breath because I don't have to run around like a chicken with my head cut off because I have 4 jobs going at one time because that's the only way I can make enough money to pay my bills. It completely changes the way you look at business. All you need is the correct mindset and confidence. That's why right here it says the first thing is master your mindset. I'm going to lay it out for you so that you can have the right mindset. I'm going to surround you with a bunch of contractors that are going to teach you, or not teach you, but they're going to support you and like say, "Hey, yeah, you said this, but that's a limited mindset." They're going to challenge you in your mindset when you're surrounded by a community of contractors that want you to win. And then we tell you how to price accordingly. And by the way, 50% is just like the lowest. I got guys that are getting 60 or 70% on job businesses that are doing 500 or more. So it's not just regulated at 50%. That's just the minimum that you should be getting. And, if you're getting 60%, it's just even more money in your pocket. So if that sounds like something that you would want in your business, then shoot me a message. Let me know. I'd be more than happy to lay this all out for you and show you exactly how we do this. It's very doable, right? It's very doable. It's not hard. It does take some time and energy invested, right? You got to learn how to sell appropriately. You got to learn how to communicate with people. But even anybody who's on this call that's in the Profit Club will tell you it's not that hard. It's not hard to do. It just takes a little bit of investment, and you got to lose your ego. You got to get rid of the ego of like, I think I know how to do everything. So if you're humble and you're hungry and you're smart, there's zero reasons why you shouldn't be getting a 50% gross profit. And if you want me to help you with that, I'd be more than happy to show you what that looks like. So just reach out and let me know, and I will do that for you. I got to hop off here, guys. I got to go pick up my son from school. I appreciate you hanging out with me. Hopefully this was helpful for some of you. I know some of you hopped on towards the end, but hopefully this was helpful to kind of see what's possible in your business. You guys should be getting a 50% gross profit. Some of you can just literally raise your prices and you won't have any problem whatsoever. Others, you may run into some resistance, and that's where I may be able to help you. So just let me know. I'm always here. You know where to find me. Thanks, guys. Have a great rest of your day. Appreciate you.